Would you please put your hands together and give a warm BC Natural Resources Forum welcome to Amy Giesbrecht, who's sitting in for her colleague Cam Anderson to introduce, and of course Amy and Cam are with North River, right Amy? And you're going to tell us all about your project, and then Amy will introduce our next panel. Give it up for Amy.
Good morning. Thanks to our Indigenous hosts for welcoming us to their lands and to everyone for gathering here today. It's great to see everyone back in person, and it's North River's privilege to be able to sponsor this important event. North River is a gas gathering and processing business with operations in Northeast BC and Northwest Alberta. As a midstream operator, we play a unique and important role in BC's natural gas industry, processing approximately 20% of BC's natural gas and connecting that product to transition options. This is such a great opportunity in BC to export LNG and clean fuels, growing the economy and reducing domestic and global emissions. Western Canada has the most responsibility produced natural gas modules as a result of strong regulations, ambitious climate policies, and the most important, ever-increasing collaboration and innovations across that part of the industry. Reaching this potential will only happen in partnerships with Indigenous communities and businesses, which is why learning from leaders like those on this panel is so important. With that, I'll pass the mic over to the panel, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. My name is Byng Giraud. You don't have to know my last name because I'm the only Byng you're going to meet. I'm going to be the moderator of the panel today. We're going to make this a little more fun, so it's not going to be moderator because I'm not going to moderate anything. These people are going to have some exciting things to tell you about progressive Indigenous business, which I think we're all very concerned about. And I'm really excited to be up on this panel because I know almost everybody. Chief Councillor Chris Roberts is my new friend now, but everybody else, Lori Ackerman, Crystal Smith, Napoleon, Justin Napoleon from Salteau. These are all friends of mine. And I just want to say a quick thing about the Chislata, who just were up, and my friend Mike was up, and Chief Corinne. I did a deal with the Chislata about 13 years ago, and I got to tell you that this nation is a real example about how to do things right, protecting their culture and their heritage while doing business. A great team, so great presentation, Mike. Okay, we're going to jump right in. So we can catch up with some time so Mr. Brown doesn't come up here and throw us off. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, but also as part of the introduction, because this is the Progressive Indigenous Business Initiatives panel, is to tell us why they're up here. So this is Little Dragon's Den. Make me your pitch as to why you're part of a progressive Indigenous business organization. And I'm going to put the Councillor Chris Roberts on the right on the spot. He's got to go first. So over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon. I want to start by mentioning what a pleasure it is to be at this conference for the first time and then to be invited to actually speak at it. I'm the elected Chief Councillor with the Wewickum First Nation. Our territory is in Campbell River on Vancouver Island, central Vancouver Island, and the mainland inlet adjacent there. I don't think we have a lot of time, so I'm going to try and jump right in. Why am I up here? And I'm not necessarily surprised to be invited to this, but what message do I want to deliver? And I struggle with the title of Progressive Indigenous Business Initiatives. Because everything that we're doing, I guess, could be considered as progressive these days. We're in a very progressive time because of the recognition of our rights and our title and the fact that the territories where you're all operating, where you have an interest, where the government's been stepped in for the last 150 or 200 years to manage it, it is ours. It belongs to the nations and the territories where you live and play and work. And that acknowledgement, that recognition is the foundation that leads to how we're going to be a part of it. I'm not very good with the catchphrases of you hear a lot of not for us, without us, or whatever, and I've been thinking a lot about that one. Don't do anything for us. It's us. It's a matter of coming to us with your ideas, with your proposals, so we can understand what it is that you want to achieve, and then working with us in a respectful way, I think we can advance things in a manner that achieves outcomes that are for all of us to enjoy. I have a bit of an economics background. I'm sure there's some economists in the room. So there's some buzzwords that have been shared over the last little while this morning about costs. And I think about efficiencies. So I think we just need to cut to the chase. And industry and government need to arrive where we're at. And I think there's an all-time high as far as how that's been recognized now. But what it does is reduces or eliminates transactions costs. And when the transactions cost, the time it takes, all the lawyers, all the consultants, all this technical stuff is too complicated or too complex, it bars efficient outcomes and efficient deals. And so by arriving where we're at as First Nations, recognizing our capacity in our communities and understanding what our values are and what we believe in and how we want to manage our lands, then I think those barriers and transactions costs get reduced to a point where we can continue to move on with efficient arrangement and outcomes for prosperity for all of us to enjoy. I'll leave it there, Byng. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Excellent. So now I'm going to move over to my good friend, Laurie Ackerman, former mayor of Fort St. John, and now leading an exciting new business enterprise with Blueberry.
Thank you, Byng. So first of all, thank you to the Klaykaitene for their warm welcome. It was wonderful. Why am I sitting up here? Well, I have a significant opportunity in front of me to help the Blueberry River First Nations with to fulfill all of the work that the Chief and Council started after the last election a year ago to create a corporation that would enhance their involvement as the shareholder of that corporation in revenue-generating companies. And so many of you know that there has been a significant court case, and the Blueberry is looking forward to restoring the land, healing the land, and bringing it back so that they can enjoy their cultures. So the first thing that we're working on is Grandmother's Greenhouse. And so we'll have Indigenous plants and seeds for that restoration to be completed. And we're also going to be doing some restoration company to ensure that that work is being done and that the band will eventually benefit from the revenue generated from that. It's after that, the world is our oyster like it's everybody else's. And I think that I've always been a firm believer in diversification of your revenue sources as a community and building for our grandchildren's grandchildren, right? That's what any community should do, regardless if you're First Nations or non-First Nations.
Thanks, Laurie. Justin, you've got some exciting things going on in your neck of the woods up in the far northeast there. What are you guys progressive in business these days?
Thanks, Byng. I'd like to say thank you to the Klaykaitene Nation for allowing us to be on their land. It's much appreciated, and thank you to everybody that showed up. Progressive business for us is, we decided to make a change at Salteau several years ago from having an economy that was based on a joint venture model where you didn't have ownership. So we changed to a self-performance and ownership economic model. And it's brought a lot of benefits to our nation. When we made that change, it brought more revenue to the nation, which gave us the ability to reinvest in our economy, reinvest in our infrastructure, and reinvest in our people. And with that comes control. Control over our culture, control over our lands, and control over our futures. We've drastically improved our employment amongst our membership with our being owners of our own businesses. Currently, we employ directly about 300 employees, and we run about a 50 to 70% Indigenous content with our businesses. And we also look for ownership in projects that come into our territory to have the long-lasting benefit, where historically, if we were running under the joint venture model, it was a feast or famine. You had projects come in, there was IBAs, you had a joint venture with a business that was there for the project, and then they left afterwards. So with this new approach, we have the ability to form better relationships, better partnerships with industry, which really gives us a lot more say and a better ability to communicate with industry and have them acknowledge our concerns, work with our lands departments, and make sure that our environmental concerns are being met. So for us, the balance of economy and culture is an important one, and the fact that we get to own and operate and run businesses which are, they're businesses which are owned by Indigenous people. They're not Indigenous businesses. They're competitive. They compete with everybody that's going to come into our territory, and the benefits that come back to the nation are tenfold what they were historically. And by doing this, the relationships that we build are much more strong and much more capable of having longevity with industry. So I think for me, that's what progress is, planning for generations and having economic stability for not just the nations, but for your surrounding region and the locals that are our neighbors and friends that we work and play with. So to me, that's what's important. And since we've kind of approached this model, there's been a lot of other opportunities that came up, which I'll give props to industry for, which is acknowledging the importance of First Nations and equity and big projects that come through and impact our territories. And I've seen a huge pivot from industry in the last few years, and I have to give all of industry props on that. So thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Now, our next speaker almost needs no introduction. Chief Councillor Chris Smith, you're a bit of a rock star with the LNG Canada project. So maybe introduce yourself, but talk about some of the other progressive businesses that you folks are working on.
Thanks, Byng. It is definitely great to be back here and to see everybody in person as opposed to on a little screen. So I've been the Chief Councillor for approximately 6 years. I've seen the positive final investment decision from LNG Canada, our friends here in the room. But leading up to today, I am a very proud board member of Cedar LNG, which will be, and I note the words will be, the largest private sector investment that will be Indigenous owned. So we are progressing that project through the EA and impatiently waiting for that decision. I would have liked the decision before being on this panel today to speak about the positive relationship that we have with the province in regards to moving Indigenous-led projects forward in this province and in this country. But I am definitely, the opportunities that both LNG Canada and Cedar have allowed the nation to explore and to grow and learn from, and the most inspiring aspect of all that is occurring within the Haisla territory is our ability to build relationships with neighboring First Nations that allow that opportunity for others in the region, in the area, to also participate in the economy.
Thanks, Chief. So yeah, really exciting projects, really exciting project up in Haisla territory. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists an individual question because I want to drill down into what you need to know as industry, because there's a lot of industry in the room, whether you're private sector or involved from the government perspective, or Indigenous leaders. This is an industry event. So I'm going to drill down into some of the decisions and some of the things that these individuals are working on that maybe can give you some insight as to how the dial is being changed in terms of working with Indigenous business and progressive Indigenous business initiatives. So I'm going to go back to you, Justin. So there was two things I kind of wanted to juxtapose one to the other. You recently signed on with Coastal GasLink, become an equity partner there, so obviously supporting that project. But on the other hand, you were welcomed to the decision by regulators to turn down the Sukunka coal mine project. So you've got one thing you've sort of grasped onto, another one that you were happy that it didn't go ahead. Tell me about that decision process that your nation goes through to make those kinds of very difficult decisions.
Sure, yeah, and they are very difficult decisions, and we never come to them without a lot of forethought and an entire team that provides input. We have a TREP department, which stands for Treaty Rights and Environmental Protection. They're in one of the booths here today. They're amazing. They carry a lot of the weight when it comes to industry interactions and environmental assessments and monitoring what the treaty right impacts of projects are going to be. So I'll touch on the coal mine first. We have several coal mines surrounding our nation as it is right now, and in the local area we are struggling to find manpower to even staff a lot of the stuff that's going on in the area. And on top of that, the location was in a very undesirable location. It actually impacted severely the Caribou Mountain Range, and we're in part with West Moberly First Nations and the provincial government working to restore the population of the mountain caribou herds that have been decimated throughout the years. It's one of the only successful repopulation programs globally that's actually shown a marked population increase in a declining species. So I give big props to my TREP team on that. So it was just, for that one, it was the wrong project, the wrong place, the wrong time. With CGL, you know, we have the feedstock already. The leases are already built. Natural gas is a good bridge between, you know, carbon-producing fuels towards renewables. I think the world's going to need natural gas. You build a pipeline, you reclaim it, and then you have a wildlife corridor. So the impacts are a lot less from, and a lot more temporary from, a pipeline going through the territory as opposed to another open pit mine, which would have had negative impacts on an endangered species. So those are just some of the things we take into account when we evaluate these projects to see whether, you know, we got to balance the economic benefit with the environmental protections that we care so much about.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I think it's important to understand that nations who may be opposed to a project aren't anti-business. It's just the wrong one. You know, my own experience working with industry, if you know in advance that a particular area is sensitive or a no-go, maybe you should look elsewhere, right? Just don't spend your money trying to push a string. Anyway, I'm going to move over to Chris over here, or Chris Roberts. Got two Chris's, sorry. Chief, your nation has done something along these lines that Justin talked about in terms of how to assess projects. You created in 2018 the Waiwaikam Guardians. Tell me about the work they do and how that both protects what your nation and your people want to protect, but also allows for business to thrive in your territories.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks, Byng. And I think it's good to follow up on what Justin's talking about. And to be honest, I'm envious of one day having what I would call a natural resources department and fully resourced to carry out the important work that they do. So we refer to it as Guardian Watchman, our stewardship program on the coast. A lot of their emphasis is focused within the marine environment, but it's actually been in place for us for about 7 years, and it's something that we've really focused and honed in investment to recruit and train our members to be the direct participants in all of the different research, monitoring, analysis, eyes and ears observation, fulfilling what is our stewardship obligation bestowed to us from our Creator in our lands. And it was a missing link for many years in our region, where we were inundated with consultative processes, referrals, just unfathomable amount of things to wade through in a very bureaucratic, paperwork, desktop way. And we did the best that we can with that. There's some really good adaptations in working with a regional model of how to do that in a more expedited fashion. But getting to the chase of what it is, the work that they do, the studies that are done in the territory for different propositions, whether it be salmon farming, aquaculture operations, or extension of mine operations and assessing their closure plans. We couldn't do that work in an informed way in a decision that, as a people and as an elected chief and council government, you know, we have a lot of transition, but it creates more stability and predictability for both parties, for those in our community, on what it is we want to see happen in the territory and how those are going to be carried out. And it's really in, not its infancy, but I think it's on a big trajectory right now, and it's an area for our nation that we're going to continue to grow and invest in, because with things like free and prior and informed consent and that recognition of our right to make decisions in our territory, it's one of the most important pieces of that we're direct participants in all the work that takes place, so that when the decisions are made, they're well informed and they create more predictability for investment climate, and, as you say, areas that probably shouldn't be considered for certain type of projects. So, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And you know, I guess what we're seeing is nations either have created or some are in the process of creating their own technical teams or referral teams. I I think from an industry perspective, you have to understand that there is, you may have a federal regulator, you may have a provincial regulator, but you've got a third regulator. This is a third order of government that needs to regulate. I think one of the challenges, and maybe some of you can touch on this, is the capacity to fund these things. The federal government taxes, the provincial government taxes, that's how they pay for their biologists and archaeologists and scientists. The nations generally have to turn to the proponent. So, we've got this effective programs that Justin and Chris have talked about, and maybe Chris and Lori can speak to this, about how are these things funded? And what's our role as industry to make sure that these things do occur, because this is a third regulator. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump over to you, Lori. Bit of a, it's an issue everybody's aware of, the court case regarding cumulative effects with Blueberry. And I know you're on the company side and can't really talk to the legal, but in the context of that, which is, I think a lot of people are paying very close attention to, a lot of First Nations, a lot of companies, certainly governments. In the context of that what's taken place, you've got this new corporation, and this new corporation is, you've mentioned some of the things they're doing, but what kind of new corporation in that sort of environment, like where do you want to take that? Like, where do you think that corporation can make up for some of the things that you don't want to see in the territory anymore?
Well, first of all, I haven't heard anything that they don't want in their territory anymore. I think what they just want is to have a responsible, sustainable, balanced approach to resource industries. And that's why we're starting with Grandmother's Greenhouse and the Restoration Company. And as we move forward, I honestly think that we're going to be looking at investment opportunities that anyone would look at, and to really diversify. And so, let's look at what the community itself needs. They need some housing and that kind of stuff. Start, residential construction, civil engineering. Let's take a look at owning land inside the city of Fort St. John and becoming landowners, and not unlike anyone else would look at for investment. The community needs revenue for its programs that it puts on for its elders and its youth. And the reality is, and having spent 11 years as a mayor, we're actually, as elected local government officials, we don't have nearly the responsibility on our shoulders as chief and council would with First Nations. And so kudos to all of you for what you take on and still smile at the end of the day. I just think that it is time that the First Nations were allowed to even out this economic path that they have been on. And I think it's time for the rest of us to help out. So if you have an opportunity to, first of all, learn about the reality of First Nations in Canada, because we didn't learn it in school, you should start there.
Excellent advice, Lori. As a non-Indigenous person, we have to take the time when we're, particularly in British Columbia, with so many Indigenous communities and actually, frankly, on the leading and some would say bleeding edge of a lot of the court cases, that we do have an obligation as non-Indigenous people to educate ourselves. And frankly, I've found most of the people that I've dealt with in the Indigenous community be very generous in terms of telling you and teaching you their history, their past, and how better to work with them. So I think that's great advice, Lori. Back over to you, the other Chris on the other end. So obviously everybody knows about LNG Canada, and they're learning more about Cedar. I think Cedar LNG, I'm curious as to, one's a private sector leading company where you're the partner, and the other one you're leading. What's the difference?
Can you repeat that second? I hear an echo, so it's kind of difficult to...
Sorry, so you've got LNG Canada and Cedar LNG. So we've got two LNG projects. One's yours and the other one where you're a partner. Can you tell me from the nation's perspective, what's the difference between the two projects in terms of how you react and behave? And
I mean, in regards to Cedar, I remember, so I've got a couple of Cedar board members here with me today that where we initially formed and started the discussions, we set our values as to how our project would be approached. We set our values our learned experiences in regards to any of the industry. And I just wanted to remind people that Haisla is not new to industrial development. While LNG is a new sector that's within our territory, we've had aluminum smelters, we've had pulp and paper mills, we had Methanex. So we've had a long line of previous leaders that have witnessed essentially the destruction of our territory. And I grew up at a time where there was a lot of talk in my grandparents' house in regards to those specific impacts from that industry. So taking a lot of what we've learned over the years and ensuring that Cedar would not have any of those impacts, and in fact would perform above expectation standards in regards to any of the work that we do, is one that we've stuck to. That goes to the discussions of the reconciliation, economic reconciliation that is to occur between Haisla and our neighboring First Nations communities. So essentially, we hear a lot of the buzzwords when it comes to economic reconciliation. Cedar is reconciliation, economic reconciliation in action. So I think that is essentially the difference between our project and not only LNG Canada, not only Coastal GasLink, but any other project in our territory.
Thanks, Councillor, Chief Councillor. So I've got some questions here. I can't quite see the board here, so I might have to stand up. Let's take some from the audience here. Here's one from Jocelyn. Who is open for business? What do First Nation communities need in terms of local business partnerships? So I'll paraphrase what I think that, so you're creating partnerships, different types of things, joint ventures, companies that you own solely. What do you need in order to set those types of companies up? We'll start on your end, Chris. What do you look for? What do you look for when you're setting those things up?
It varies. I think everyone has each business has a unique opportunity. Some of them would result in a joint venture type of agreement at the most basic level, but we're really striving for more of that ownership and direct participation. I really like, my co-speakers here, how they're addressing that as far as that's where the true difference is made. I mean, it's not really touching on this question so much, but it's something I kind of wanted to get out as far as that's the difference maker of when the recognition takes place of we are the beneficial owner of a resource of something, and it's our value set that is guiding how it's managed. There's so much that comes from that as far as what those products are in the end of the day, how they evolve, how they adapt, and get brought to different markets. And I think we're going to have a lot more resilience in our communities when we continue to be more in the driver's seat. So as far as what we look for in this, just trying to look at the question. Oh, it's moved up on the thing there. Yeah, I danced around the question a little bit. I don't think I answered it very clearly, Byng, but those are some thoughts I'll offer.
Yeah, so it's an important thing when you're looking. I mean, this is a dance with two partners, right? The industry is looking for what they want to achieve, but you as a nation are looking for, these are the partners that I can work with, even when there's a business opportunity. So, Lori, I'll toss it over to you as well. What do you look for?
Well, actually, I was, when I was reading that question, my first thought was sincerity. A real desire to work with First Nations, understand the principles of truth and reconciliation, and make sure that the corporation that you're coming to the table with has that in its DNA. It is sincerely serious about partnering with a First Nations community to try and achieve reconciliation.
Good advice. Justin?
Yeah, so when we're looking at partners and trying to evaluate industry and projects, we've kind of developed almost a scoring system for where we allocate our resources and how we prioritize our time. Big thing I've seen in my nation is there's such a huge demand for industry and economic expansion, and a lot of the times we didn't have the capacity or the resources to process and put the amount of time and effort and analyze each individual process and business. So to prioritize our time, we look at projects or partners in a series of 5 different fields. How well do they engage with our community? Do they come out to the community? Do they take part in our community events? How well do they engage with our TREP department? Do they take their concerns serious? Are they willing to be flexible and work with them and find better ways if they're presented by our TREP department? How well do they engage with us commercially? Is the economic benefit going to outweigh any environmental impacts that we may have? As well as legacy, how has this business worked with us, years past before we started this new approach? And any kind of innovative ways that they might bring forward to try to include us and benefit our nation, such as, again, the equity option that was presented by the CGL pipeline, I think was a great example of that. So those are the guidelines that we kind of follow when we evaluate whether we want to partner with somebody or if we want to prioritize where we're going to allocate our resources to analyze projects and such.
Great. Chris, you've got some comments on that?
Of course, I definitely do. So in regards to major proponents, I think, again, as the other 2 chief councillors sitting on the panel with me, it all comes down to the product or what the project is, whether it's fitting within the values, but more importantly, not so much the elected leaders, but our community members. So I'm elected on behalf of 2,000 Haisla members, and essentially I report back to them. I have to answer to our membership. So whether or not the proposed major projects within our territory are mandated by our community members is a huge important piece of the work that we do in Haisla territory. When it comes to other partners such as JV partners, again, it's that willingness for the JV partners to come in and learn about what the important values are, what we want to accomplish as a nation. Essentially, we want to create independent members, and we only get independent members through careers and jobs that they are willing to participate in. So that is very important to our nation. Also, we have some goals and objectives that we want to achieve. How willing each of the partners and major industry partners want to align with us in order to achieve those goals are absolutely important.
That's good advice, Chris. And it just speaks to how this is a little bit of a different thing than perhaps business world and business to businesses, which is highly transactional. You interact simply because you want to have a transaction. It appears, based on what our panelists are saying up here, and I think many people in this room would know, that this really is less about a transaction and more about a relationship. Taking the time to get to know somebody and understand them and their culture and their people, as opposed to simply, I have an approval I need, so I'm going to contact you, or I have a referral I need to contact with you. My staff, I have the worst analogy in the world. My staff always make fun of it. It's the rake analogy. When somebody comes to borrow your rake, if they know your name and they know the names of your kids and say hi to you every day, you're probably going to lend them your rake. If they come to your door and come to borrow the rake and you've never met them before, you're probably not going to lend them your rake. So we sometimes over intellectualize these things. It's a relationship, and I think everybody here would agree with that. So back to the board here, which I've been ignoring. Sorry. What education and skills training is needed in your community for business ventures to be successful? I'll start at the other end. I don't know if you can see it from there. I might have to say it again.
I'm trying to keep an eye on any that are specific for me, that's all. So, I mean, there's so many different skill sets that are required, and I mean, for the last, I'd say, 10 years, Haisla has been strictly focused on the LNG industry, whether it be the facilities or the pipeline. But we also had to be mindful, as I'm looking into the crowd, to see our Rio Tinto friends sitting in crowd, and Simon coming new to the area. There are a variety of educational skill sets that our community is in need of. And we take a look, and we've tried not to make the mistake of having a tunnel vision when it comes to either existing industry or new industry coming to our territory, and to allow our community members to decide what is in their best interest. So allowing a wide variety of skill sets coming in. We've definitely done a lot of our work in order to remove barriers for our membership when it comes to being able to access education leading to careers. So I can't speak to anything specific. I'll leave that to the industry leaders that are here in the room in regards to what skill sets they require. But when it comes from a First Nations perspective, when it comes to a Haisla member's dreams, they're unlimited right now.
That's a really good point, because I think sometimes industry we get, because we know jobs and training and contracting and procurement are important elements of a relationship with Indigenous communities, but we forget, we always think it's how many jobs can I provide? But in a deeper relationship that's actually generating income, you know, maybe somebody doesn't want to work in the LNG facility, maybe they want to be a hairdresser, or maybe they want to be a lawyer. How can we as industry facilitate those things that aren't necessarily, again, transactionally related just to my specific project? So yeah, that's important. Justin, what do you expect? What do you think that you're? Sorry, I'm not even looking at the question. What education and skills training is needed in your communities? Sorry, it's way over there.
I kind of echo what Chief Crystal said. We've really tried to diversify our economy so that our members aren't pigeonholed into one area. They don't have to go to school for one thing. There's a breadth of opportunities for them, and whatever their hearts desire. I mean, we support them and hope that they achieve their dreams, and you know, through our work as elected leaders, it's our jobs to diversify and provide those opportunities for our membership. So I think just whatever they want to do, exactly, the world's their oyster.
Awesome. Lori, some thoughts?
Well, so my first thought is education and skills training for the community. I can't speak on behalf of the community, but I would think that it would be the same as anywhere else. And why would we limit our children and our grandchildren to what we think here and now? There's a huge future for them, and you know, they will determine that. So what we really need to do is encourage their dreams.
Yeah, my children don't listen to me anyway, so yeah, that's good advice. Chief Councillor Chris.
I have to agree with what the previous speakers just said, but to take it, you know, maybe a bit of it a different direction. Yeah, career opportunity awareness is so important, because a lot of the times I think we can help facilitate that as the leaders. Industry probably has a role beyond just career fairs, and these are the skills we require for this proposed project we need in your territory. That's pretty easy to identify, and people can find their own fit and take their own pathway on it. But to build on the question a little bit, I just want to reiterate something that Lori had said earlier, is it's incumbent upon those that are coming into our communities and want to work with us to make sure that that education and the skills of cultural awareness and understanding are present within your organizations and are part of your corporate culture of how you're going to work with us. Because if we're met with that, then I think we can really have very successful initiatives that lead to good careers. That is the difference maker that we need in our communities for a stable household income, and leading to how our members are full participants in the culture and well-being of our community that make them great places to live.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, now I'm going to turn things a little on their head, just to make this tougher on all of you. It might be particularly Lori, since you've just started there. I want to know about, without naming names, the worst interaction you had with industry. Cautionary tales here. Let's see, who wants to, who wants to go first? Chris, you see?
I'm going last. And you guys, please feel free. We got a clock here, so take up the 13 minutes.
Okay, 13 minutes. Okay.
I'll jump on that, I guess. I can't honestly say I've had an extremely bad experience with industry. I'd look at all the experiences as a chance to learn and grow and teach. So if you have a negative experience, I think it's just a position where you take, and you take that opportunity to reflect with industry and, you know, explain to them, you know, this is where we are and this is how we get to where we can be. So I don't dwell on negative experiences. I just look at them as learning experiences and ways to work with our industry partners and improve processes.
Good answer. That's where you're the chief, isn't it? Chris?
Maybe I'll follow up on that because similarly, I don't have a particular bad experience, but I think where they exist in two sectors, you know, within the forest industry and with the salmon farming aquaculture industry. And that is because they took their ability and operation on the salmon farming side of things, approximately 25 to 30 years for granted. And there was some superficial relationships there. So I think it was because it was transactional and bare bones and bare minimum. It never had an opportunity to evolve. But I'll turn that around to say that now that the conditions are different, and I'll give them some acknowledgement for a major shift in their corporate position or approach to it, it's totally different now with that recognition, and there is an opportunity to begin to work with them in a progressive way, which previously didn't exist. So,
you raise a good point there about, you know, sort of superficial relationship, or, you know, we get approvals or permits as companies, and then we sort of forget to maintain the relationship. They atrophy. You know, the real evidence of somebody, I think, from industry that you've learned this lesson is the relationship you have with that First Nation or those Indigenous people well after your project is done. So, you know, I know my buddy Frank the Tank from Tall 10 is in the room. You know, I was up working on a project there 10 years, 15 years ago. And I don't have any work up there to this day, but there's still solid friendships and relationships. And I think that's the true lesson when you don't actually have something you need. Lori, I'm putting you on the spot with this one because you're new in your job, so have you got something to say about horrible interactions?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to figure out which one to share.
Chris wants you to go long, so.
Yeah, I'll stretch her out here for you, Chris. It's interesting when people have been waiting. We all know this, okay? People have been waiting. Blueberry has done a significant amount of work. Yeoman's job from the chief and council, but so I'm getting a lot of calls from right across Canada. And so there was one company that had never worked in the industry, but they had this idea. And they were going to run water pipelines all over the place. And I said, do you realize that we're trying to restore pipelines? Like, you know, put them to bed, do the restoration? And they didn't understand how they couldn't do this. And I said, have you ever worked in the industry? No. But we know that, you know, the local area or the local drilling rigs need water. Okay. Innovation has taken the industry down a path where we don't need what these people are suggesting, and they didn't do the research into the industry to know that that wasn't needed. The other one, I'll tell you, and I'm going to stretch this out for you, Crystal, but you better get ready.
Got a yellow light anyway.
They phoned, we set up a Teams meeting, and I was on as BRR, but the community's land staff were on there, and we listened to the proposal, and I said, you know, this is something that you would have to get any kind of agreement with Chief and Council. This is not my role, but as a former local government elected official, I just have one question for you. Have you heard of the Agriculture Land Commission? And they said, no. And I said, there's your first brick wall. They don't understand the regulations, and they think that they can come and resolve all of our problems here. Because evidently we don't know how to.
The little research is, okay, I've still got 8.5 minutes, I'm down here. And everybody's waiting. You've created the foreshadowing. This is going to be big.
8 minutes, my God. So, I mean, I've spoken about that we're not new to industry. We've sat on the sidelines for many years with the industrial development, where our leadership essentially wanted, and I quote a previous chief councillor, Heber Maitland, who just wanted a share and a say. We wanted to share an opportunity. We wanted a say in how they were developed. So when I think about all the industrial development that has occurred from where it was to where it is today, it has absolutely improved. I commend Rio Tinto specifically, who has been in our territory for 50, 60 years. From one of the first developments in our territory where we didn't have that seat at the table. And I can honestly, I see Chief Louine sitting in the crowd. We come from the same background. We come from that same experience. And to what they're doing today, to have and to listen to what they want to accomplish with our communities. I've literally seen the employment opportunity with Rio Tinto go from something as low as 2% of our membership working in that plant to a numerous amount of employment opportunities that are provided for our people today, and that was done through established partnerships, having hard discussions, and listening to what those job opportunities meant and removing barriers. So I honestly commend the existing industry. Again, it's the acknowledgement, and I don't believe it's just an industry that is responsible for coming in and doing things right. I believe this is an entire stakeholder issue, whether it's the provincial, federal governments, First Nations governments, and the industry to come together to have a great experience with new development. So I definitely come from a perspective of listen to us, respect us, and learn from us. We have been in our territories since time immemorial. We are the knowledge keepers. We hold that traditional knowledge. And to have that utmost respect, and that's where our friends from LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink come in, they essentially established that. Not right off the bat, but that's one of the experiences that I would have specifically mentioned. That relationship, and I have in previous panels, didn't start out in a great approach. However, the knowledge, the respect that they had developed for our community, their project wouldn't have been successful without us. So thank you, LNG Canada, for being great partners in our territory. But I think it's a whole entire stakeholder approach, and not one aspect that I would pinpoint that would have been a horrible experience. I think it's a collective experience.
Thanks, Chris. Some good advice there. So we're getting down to our last 4.5 minutes here. So I'm going to ask for quick answers on this, but what is the number one thing that moved the dial in your nation to become a business leader? So in other words, what makes your nation a business leader now? What is it that makes you puts you on this stage? We want to hear about you as a business leader. Who wants to take that first? Justin, you got your mic ready to go.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's the people. We have a large percentage of entrepreneurs in our community, business-minded people, as well as environmentally conscious people. And with those two groups of people working together, I think that's really allowed us to progress and gain economic stability as well as increased environmental protections.
Chris?
I was trying to get more of the question out of Justin's response. Can you just...
What's the one thing that moved the dial that turned your nation into a business leader? What is it about your nation that makes it a business leader?
Wow. It comes from the first project. You know, we did a major land development in the downtown Kelm River area, and it started with a vision that my great-grandfather had over 30 years ago. And it started by trying to have the proper infrastructure and assets for the then commercial fishing industry. Not to take too long-winded of an approach here, but that was well, the first of its kind, I think maybe the second in the country, where the nation insisted, our members insisted, that if we were going to do this and develop this waterfront, which wouldn't be reserve anymore, and sacrifice so much of our small reserve in Campbell River for commercial real estate development, it had to be done on our terms, and we had to be full partners. But we really quickly learned cost overruns, so we kind of ran out of money going in those days. It was a really progressive opportunity. And ever since, that's put us on the map, if you will, and the wealth that that project has generated in our community has enabled us to diversify into other sectors. So it's kind of strange to be at this natural resource forum. We do have tons of resource opportunities in Campbell River, obviously, fisheries, forestry, mining, but our first economic initiative that changed things around for us was the land development, and that was just a circumstance of where we were located. So I really tip my hat to so many nations that have been quite remote and have made the best of what they've been able to do, of how they manage their resources and utilize that for economic initiatives. But to be completely honest, that's what it was for us. And I'm happy to share that just this year, we managed to purchase out one of the partners and are now the majority owner of that center, facing a significant reinvestment in the center. So thank you, Byng.
Thanks, Chris. Back over to your end. What made you a business leader, your nation a business leader? What do you think was the thing that turned the dial for you?
Again, it's from previous leaders that had the vision of wanting that share and that say, previous chief councillors that held that vision, but more so our people that elected those leaders based on their vision as to what our participation is. And of course, our staff. Some of the visions that our staff has and their desire to see our community succeed, and really pushing that dial in regards to what we can accomplish as nation. The negotiation, of course, as our largest accommodation off the Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada opportunity, was capacity off of the pipeline in order to build our own facility. I think that's definitely the nation's opportunity to pave the way for Indigenous participation, equity participation in major project development within this province and within this country.
Wow, thanks. Okay, Lori, given the time, 14 seconds, you've got the last word. I didn't intend that to happen.
I'll bet. So I think the trigger for Blueberry was when the Chief and Council created the vision for Blueberry River Resources, and it's arm's length without political influence, governance, and transparency to just build a future for the community.
Thanks, Lori. Well, that's the... Oh,
can I just add
absolutely.
one aspect? I was just talking with Justin, and I'm sorry. But I mean, rights and title, let's face it. The four of us wouldn't be sitting up here without rights and title. Rights and title have put our nations in this position, and I cannot leave the stage without giving credit to those nations that fought and tirelessly at that to get our nations to where we're at and where we're able to actively participate in our economies.
Thanks, Crystal. That is, we talked about learning the history, didn't we? Yeah, give her a hand. Learn the history. Delmagook was a really important court case, but since that court case, there's been many others. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to be a lawyer. Lord knows I'm not one. To learn why we are in the situation where these nations are finally able to assert themselves in the way they haven't been treated properly for 150 years. And I think you see some real leaders up here that show that there's a future that's not just bright for Indigenous communities, but for all of us as we work together. So thank you all. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a pain.
Byng, Giraud, and friends, we would ask you all to work with Jason for a nice group photo, and we'll make sure you all get one. And then please stick around, because I got a thank you gift for everybody. One more time, what a great group.